invite you to please relax and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Like watching a car pass by on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. So hello, Jane and Marianne and Karen. I always love what I call the Elijah moment, where I open my eyes and see who else has joined us. So nice to see you all. Today, as we dive into our second week of humility, our initial question for us to ponder is about chutzpah, which is kind of a particular flavor of humility. And Rabbi Jan Katsu in the Mussar Torah commentary, he asks, when is chutzpah a vice and when is it a virtue? So maybe for beginners, maybe someone could remind us, what is chutzpah? Yes, Janet.
Chutzpah has a brash element.
Mm-hmm.
The British would say cheeky, or my parents would have called it fresh.
Yeah. So great. Anyone want to add anything? I think that was pretty good. But yes, Jane?
Oh, the word nerve comes to mind.
Yeah. It's being kind of nervy. Okay, so
I wanted to say it's to go for it. Have chutzpah, just you go for it.
Yeah, is an element of going for it. So when is this a virtue and when is it a vice? Or perhaps you think it's always a virtue and never a vice, or vice versa. Yes, Sue.
Vice versa.
And then Joanna. And
I
Joanna.
was going to say, I think it's when it's helpful. I mean, when you have chutzpah and you do something that can help somebody in some way, I think that's a virtue.
Great. Love that. Okay, Joanne and then Jane.
Yeah, I was going to say that it can be a virtue because you go after what it is that you feel like you need to do, even though to somebody else it might seem cheeky or nervy or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but not to be intimidated.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we need to kind of avoid that feeling of intimidation if we're kind of stepping out or being nervy. Thank you, Joanne. Jane, what are your thoughts?
Think of the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. I think being assertive can be a positive thing. Being aggressive, because it's at someone else's expense. The aggressiveness.
Yeah, at someone else's expense. Yeah, that's a good distinction. And I also, it strikes me that sometimes someone might be assertive and someone else will decide they're, to label that as being aggressive.
Mhm.
So with all of these, things, when we're in the Mussar space, really the only judge is ourselves. We need to figure out for ourselves, what that right line is to cross, because we have the most context. Anyone else care to chime in on this one or comment on when it's a virtue, when it's a vice?
It's Karen. My quick take is that chutzpah is boldly taking risks and having emergency first responders, knowing emergency first responders. I would think that there are plenty of times when someone who is not in their field of practice thinks that would call what they do chutzpah when they are rescuing people from burning cars, from somebody who has fallen from a cliff and they need to belay down. Those would be really positive reasons to have chutzpah.
Yeah, Jane?
To me, those things you've described, Sarah, Karen, sound more like bravery to me.
Yeah, so it could be, it could be considered bravery. It could, from another perspective, it could be chutzpah.
I didn't mean to say, I don't consider chutzpah the same as bravery.
Uh-huh. All right, thank you. So I have Sarah and then Sue. Sarah, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised because vice versus virtue. I never thought that chutzpah was a vice. For some reason, I didn't have a negative connotation about it, which is interesting, and I wonder if that's because I'm from New York and everybody's got chutzpah. I don't know. I mean, so it's interesting to see, but now that people are discussing it, I can see a vice versus a virtue, sort of like being like a loud mouth or saying too much, like right place, right time type thing. So
Yeah, and we're going to look at what the rabbi has to say. There's a specific story where he brings into context a particular aspect of it being a vice, and I'm wondering if that will come out of this conversation. So Sue.
I'm glad I'm following that. I live in Minnesota, but I'm from New York, so I get the New York comment. And what I did was I just did a quick Google search. I was kind of curious, and it says extreme self-confidence or audacity, and then they use it in a sentence, and it says, "Love him or hate him, you have to admire Cohen's chutzpah." I thought that was pretty funny, so that's what I have to add.
I grew up in Syracuse, New York, so I totally get that as well. I like to, California is so different. It was such a hard adjustment for me to the indirect way of speaking that people have out here, and people getting all upset and offended when I'm just giving them feedback. I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah, Joanne. Joanne, I think you may still be on mute. Yes.
Sorry. I've had experiences of being called rude, which may be
Mhm.
a reaction to my being direct and not indirect, well, pussyfooting, and then people have been just as rude back to me, and I think, and the same people who are calling me rude have been rude to me. So I don't know. It doesn't seem to go both ways with them.
Mm.
So that's my comment. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Well, chutzpah is bravery tinged with rudeness. Okay. Let's take a look and see what Rabbi Katsu had to say. So this was in the Mussar Torah commentary. I have a volunteer to read these bullets, and I may stop you a couple of times to discuss, depending on my level of chutzpah at the moment.
I'll read.
Okay.
Okay, so to know whether chutzpah is a vice or a virtue, we need to look within. What is motivating our chutzpah? Are we taking credit for work that is not ours? Also, what is the impact of our chutzpah on other people? Are we trying to give voice to someone who has been silenced and cannot speak for themselves? Our moral integrity is at stake. We should ask, who is benefiting from my chutzpah? And then adapted from Rabbi Jan Katsu, the Mussar Torah commentary.
Thank you. I'm going to copy this and put it, I'm going to stop the share, and then I'm going to copy and put this in the chat. But while I'm doing this, does anyone want to chime in? What is Rabbi Katsu, where does he see the vice in chutzpah?
Goes back to being helpful. If it's helping somebody, it's a virtue. If it's
Mhm.
not, it's a vice, very simply.
Yeah. Hey, Krista, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. We're talking about chutzpah as a subset of humility. He is talking, the story which kind of, the context that he's talking about this is the story where people are complaining about water, and God tells Moses to hold his rod over the stone and say that, God is providing water, and then water will come out of the stone. And Moses strikes the stone twice, and water comes out. And this was the incident that led God to tell Moses that he was not going to join the promised land. And Rabbi Katsu says it wasn't that he struck the rock. The big sin was chutzpah, because what he said was, shall we provide water for you? And he said that Moses was taking credit for God's miracle. And at almost every other, and probably every other point, Moses is very humble, and he does give God credit, but he was angry, he was grieving his sister, and he kind of lost it. And he said, shall we provide water for you? And I do think that is one of the real negative things for chutzpah, where I've seen people do that, like in the working world or in other places, where they'll take credit for somebody else's work, or they won't give proper attribution where it belongs. And that is really a nervy thing to do. I don't usually think of chutzpah in that context, but I'm like, yeah, boy, it takes a lot of chutzpah to stand in front of a room of people and take credit for something that you didn't do. Margie.
I'm thinking about the news today, and I think there's a lot, it took a lot of chutzpah for some of these, for what's happening, in light of what has happened. And I don't want to bring politics into that too much, but I just like got a lot of chutzpah. That Supreme Court, that's where, to me, it is very much a, what was it? What opposite of virtue? I forgot the word already.
Vice.
A vice, thank you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Departy.
Janet.
One of the people I'm going to see when I'm in England in a week or so is Jocelyn Bell Burnell, and she made international news because she was denied a Nobel Prize for discovering pulsars. Her professor took the credit. Then a year or two later, she was given a several $1 million prize by an American institution, and she's giving it all to help women who are going into science. Jocelyn is probably the most humble person I have ever met. Obviously, her professor was chutzpah beyond belief. It's kind of, look at the equation. Look what happens when you get somebody who's very humble and somebody who's chutzpah. But Jocelyn has come into her own, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, great example. Thank you, Janet. Any other thoughts, or shall we take this a level deeper? Because now we kind of have this sort of, we could, chutzpah very much fits my definition of a soul trait. Having too much or too little, or both can get you into trouble. So let's see, we can think about them on the spectrum, kind of similar to humility, or having too much humility can cause issues. Last week, we kind of dove into this quote from Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, where it was about holding oneself back in order to please other people, as an example of having too much humility. So we are going to look at a different reason for holding oneself back in a quote from Duties of the Heart. And this was written, Duties of the Heart was the first Mussar book. It was originally written in Judeo-Arabic. And here, the author, Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda, is talking about some of the mental process he went through when deciding to write the book. So may I have a volunteer to read this, please?
I'll volunteer.
Okay, great.
When I planned to execute my decision to write this book, I saw that one like me is unworthy of writing a book such as this. I surmised that my ability would not suffice to analyze all the necessary aspects, owing to the difficulty and to my wisdom being insufficient, and that it would be presumptuous undertaking, so that I considered changing my mind and abandoning the book. Duties of the Heart by Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda.
Thank you. And this was adapted from Rabbi David Jaffe's IJS Tikkun Midot curriculum. So once again, I'm going to copy this and put it in the chat. So what's going on here? And I really edited this down for space purposes. He listed all kinds of reasons why he couldn't write this. His command of Arabic wasn't good enough, and he had this reason and he had that reason. So what do we think is going on here? Yeah, Sue.
Well, one of the definitions of chutzpah was having extreme self-confidence. When I looked at what you posted, it looked like this person has no self-confidence. One like me is unworthy. My wisdom is insufficient. My ability would not suffice. It seems to me that there's a lack of self-confidence.
Yeah, it sure looks that way. This is from someone whose book we're reading 1,000 years later. But he sort of was displaying a lack of confidence. What else? What do other people see? Sue.
Sarah.
Oh, Sarah, sorry.
That's okay. It reminds me of the reading from chapter 5 about humility. You know, the very definition of having either too much humility or too little, and being, having no confidence in oneself or being overly confident, that continuum.
Yeah, absolutely. And where would you put him on that continuum based upon this snippet?
Well, no humility, too little humility.
Mhm.
Right.
Probably this one, I always get confused whether it's too much or too little. This one, I think, is probably too much because he's kind of like, oh, I'm not. Too little humility is kind of when someone's really arrogant. And so
Okay, so I mean, I think of it like as a doormat or a dragon.
yeah, he's kind of, oh,
Doormat.
got it. Yeah, so he's a little on the doormatty side here. Great, thank you. So we have Joanne and then Karen.
Let's see. Yeah, so it also reminded me of when God called Moses at the burning bush to go lead the people out of slavery, and Moses was giving like a million reasons why he couldn't do it. And finally God said, look, your brother's coming and he'll talk to you, and just you doing it, That's it. But this
Yeah,
also
right,
reminds me of-
exactly. I gotta bring my dry cleaning in. My car needs to go to the shop. The
Yeah.
animal's gonna go into labor. Yeah, so Moses has all kinds of excuses why he can't do it.
Right.
Very, very similar. Karen.
So what I really love about this piece is at the end when we read, so that I considered changing my mind and abandoning the book, but the rabbi didn't. And what that says is, yeah, I was in awe of, and I was really feeling my place on the end of where too much humility is, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, coming back, sometimes we get to one end and we take a look and we analyze and we're like, you know what, I'm not going to stay here. And so what this tells me is whatever end we get to, that we can think about it and then we can reposition ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great segue because I have a second slide and I'm just going to go right to sharing in the chat because well, maybe we'll share in the chat and then I'll share the slide. But Karen, do you want to read kind of what he had to say about like why he chose to go on?
No. Okay, if someone else reads.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I can read, but I reconsidered and became suspicious of myself for having chosen to rest and to dwell in the abode of peace and tranquility. If all those involved in good causes were to remain silent and still until they could completely attain their ideal, no one would ever say a word after the prophets who are chosen by God. That reminds me of Martin Luther King.
Please say more.
I think he said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Didn't he say that?
Could be. I hadn't heard that attributed to King, but I didn't know who it was attributed to. But yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably a lot of King quotes that, so what does that mean if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem? And this can be for you, Marianne, or for anyone. Yeah, Karen.
I'm just thinking quickly about Elie Wiesel and how he seems to think the opposite of everything is indifference. And so not to be indifferent. And he had a way, as I've read, of quietly making his views known loudly.
Yes. Yes. Sarah.
It reminds me of the see something, say something, what is it? Say something do something or see something, say something.
Mhm.
No, the opposite of don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, see something, say something. Yeah, and what way does it remind you of that? If you could explain a little more why that's important.
Well, it's sort of like if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, you're like the status quo and
Mhm.
stuff goes on. And I found for myself in the work setting, I would often say things that I think a lot of people felt when I was young. And then, you put it out there, but then your head's on the chopping block.
Mm.
Eventually, as I got more mature in my field, I noticed that. And, sometimes it was better to keep my mouth closed. But, it's like having courage for your convictions, It's
Yeah,
not always easy to do.
no, it isn't. Thank you, Sarah. Gosh, Sarah. Okay, Janet. If you could remember to unmute, please.
Here we go. I was thinking about workmates and also family members who would recite a long list of fetches, and then at the end say, "But what are you going to do?
Mm.
What are you going to do?" To me, that is a classic example of being part of the problem.
Mm.
Of course, there are times when there is nothing you can do. I realize that. But the kvetching doesn't provide anything, does it?
Not really, no. I want to zoom back to the text. Everyone's brought up, and thank you, Jana, because you and others have brought up really good points, but there's a few things in this writing which really speak to me. One is I became suspicious of myself. So again, that goes back to the looking within. He's first like, it'd be too chutzpahdik of me to write this. But then he became suspicious of myself for having chosen to rest and dwell in the abode of peace and tranquility. What's wrong with dwelling in the abode of peace and tranquility? So we have Joanne and then Sue.
Well, I think it's like taking an easy way out, when he really did have something to offer and it was important to share it.
Yeah, this is important. I have something important to say. And it's going to be hard work. And I might get some crap for it. But it's important, so I'm not going to take the easy way out. Sue, what are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking that we're all here for a reason, and if we have an idea that we want to express or an action, that sometimes I feel like that's, if nobody else can do it, but we can say it or do it, then we should do it. And sometimes we're scared or we don't have the confidence to act on that, and we hold back. And I think that's the humility, the balance of the humility is when to just speak it or do it. But if you sit in that place of peace, tranquility, you don't go forward, you don't do it, you don't say it. So I think you have to figure out, what to say, what to do. But if it comes from your heart and your soul, you should say it and do it if it can help.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Margie. You can remember to unmute, please.
Okay. Whew, I'm on a different iPad. Okay. It's very easy to sit back and be complacent and just hope that somebody else is going to step up and do it. That's where it takes chutzpah. You got to just take the leap. And if it doesn't work out, you tried and you just try again. You know, it's very easy to just to sit back.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I always think like, I used to really kind of confuse, think tranquility was okay. And, and then I started associating it with the word tranquilizers, where, if you say someone is acting like they're on tranquilizers, it's not a compliment. And obviously for certain medical conditions, it's really important and critical, but that's like, sleepwalking through life is not, we can do better than that. Marianne, what are you thinking?
Well, maybe this is part of my evil inclination to say this, but I'm the kind of person that if something's wrong, I will speak up, but it's very stressful for me, extremely stressful. And I find myself sometimes feeling resentful that other people aren't doing this because I feel like I have to do it all the time. So.
I don't know that that's, trying to say, well, I'm not going to say whether that's your evil inclination or not, but speaking for me personally, I can certainly relate to that. Why am I the one that has to say this? I mean, I get very trivial about that too. Do I have to take the trash out every week? Well, yes, you do, as a matter of fact. So it's, that's kind of your job. All right. I want to give us, okay, we'll hear from Margie and then we'll go to break.
yeah, thank you. Just one more thought I had, taking the initiative all the time, would that be a trait of somebody who is a leader? I mean, I always find that people who are natural leaders tend to take the lead. They also know how to delegate, but sometimes you just really, it does take few people who are willing to take leadership responsibility. As this rabbi wrote, because I think of rabbis not only being teachers, but I also look to them as a leader in our community, or in this case, the Kudas community. So maybe I just think of it as maybe a trait of somebody who's a natural leader, because we can't all be.
I certainly, yeah.
Barty?
Sarah, what do you?
Well, I was thinking that it's a lot how you say it, because that's something that I know that I work on for myself. You can have good ideas, you can be a good leader, but sometimes if you say it in a way that's too brash, it can turn people off, or too direct. So it just becomes challenging because, like you said, there's like cultural differences in the coasts, for example. And I'm a very direct person, and some people do not appreciate that. And it's like, I'm not trying to be rude. This is just sort of the way I am. But now that I know that some people view that as rude, or I've been on this earth long enough to observe that other people can be more like pussyfoot around it, or not be as direct. I mean, I think that there's a middle ground. And it's like, and I know for myself, what I hope to be able to do is to say things with grace so that I can speak the truth, but not offend people. That would be my wish for myself,
I think speaking with grace, finding the middle way, those are, that's kind of the Mussar project. Okay, Karen.
So as I listen to all this, I'm thinking about two things that I'm conscious of doing now that maybe I wasn't years ago. And one is not being afraid to express myself as I am. And I think that people need to be comfortable with who they are and not feel the need to follow the herd. And the other piece of it, a little on the flip side, is to know your audience.
Hmm.
So I want to be who I am, but I also want to know who my audience is. So for those of you who like fashion, one situation might be an anthropology day and the other might be a tailor day and tailor day.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get ready to go to our breakout rooms. And so this question, and we started with Rabbi Ibn Pakuda, Rabbi Bachya, had all these rationalizations that he grew suspicious of. And so maybe what are some of the rationalizations or stories that you tell yourself that prevent you from moving outside your comfort zone? And again, remember, our object here is to listen without judgment and not to give advice. It's just to kind of provide accompaniment to someone and to each other as we kind of go through this introspection exercise. So I'm going to add this to the chat. And then let's see, where are my breakout rooms? Here we go. Okay, so you should see on the screen offer to join a breakout room. So please click on that. And I will see you in a few minutes. Hey everyone, welcome back. How were those conversations? What did you discover about maybe some of the excuses you use or reasons that you use that hold you back from stepping out of your comfort zone? It's clearly what Bachya ibn Pakuda was having trouble doing, and he overcame that, as we talked about. So would anyone care to share? And remember, don't share what your partner shared, only what you shared if you feel comfortable. Yes, Sarah.
I'm going through some very serious things in my life, and one of them is that it's a criminal felony assault and battery case that is against my husband, and the final thing is in August, and I get to write and read a victim impact statement. And I have just begun to research it, and I intend to write that and read it to the judge. And but it has been a very, very rough road, and people cannot handle it. I mean, people that were my friends and family, and it's been, like a snow globe that you shake my whole life like that. But I was saying in my small group that I'm rediscovering myself, and I'm grateful for that, but I know that's kind of an extreme example, but I intend to do that and speak my truth.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Sarah, and listening with an open heart. And we're all supporting you and sending you strength as you go through all of this. Anyone else care to share? Yes, so we have Margie and then Jane.
For me, will you repeat the, I lost it, it's not in the chat anymore, the statement that you wanted us to,
Yeah, let me put it back in the chat.
Thank you.
Here. just a second. I have to navigate various things around the computer.
But I'll start speaking. I think for me, it's just starting. It's fear of not doing it the best, whatever it is I endeavor, maybe like a creative block, because somebody else, it'll get criticized. It will be, it's not the best. You know, there's always somebody who's going to do it better. Is it going to be good enough?
Mm.
So that keeps me from just starting it. Although more and more I'm learning that just go ahead, just do it. If it's a failure, only I will know. And if it's successful, put it out there. And don't overthink it. I tend to do that a lot. Is like or if I'm in a volunteer situation, like I'm on my temple board and I say something and then I go home and think, God, why did I say that? Was that stupid? Or, was that, and it's value, and I know it has value, but I tend to think, oh God, just shtika, just stay silent. But I think people do take to heart what I say, and they'll plug it in where necessary. And if it's not necessary, then don't use it. DBRT.
Thank you, Margie. Okay, we have Janet and then Marianne.
Yeah, I was thinking a few weeks ago, I was involved in this very intense project and I was being paid a flat fee for it. But the end of the project became extremely time consuming and detail oriented. And I decided to ask for more money and without apologizing. And I was very proud of myself for doing that because I have a tendency, if I'm asking for something, to do it in an apologetic manner. And so I just did it saying, this is taking me about 10 more hours and I would like to be paid X beyond what the contract called for. As it turns out, I should have asked for even more money because by the time I got finished, I had done a lot more work, but I felt I could not go back again and ask for more, but I did. The person who was in charge said, yes, you definitely deserve it, and thank you for doing all you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big thing for me, to learn to ask for something without being apologetic about it.
Great. That is a great example of stepping outside of your comfort zone and occupying and doing some, healthy chutzpah, perhaps. Marianne.
I think one thing that holds me back is the fear of being physically hurt. Like I've stepped in when a child was being abused or when there was a drug ring, I stepped in. And so that's one of the things. And also being sort of maybe marginalized, emotionally marginalized. That's another thing that prevents me from moving outside my comfort zone.
Yeah, well, that's certainly understandable. Sometimes, unfortunately, we're in a situation where if we want to step in, it could be dangerous, and it's very understandable that could hold us back because physical safety is key for sure. On this subject of kind of chutzpah and moving outside of your comfort zone, I wanted to share that it was considered very chutzpahdik of me to start the American Mussar website. And I got phone calls and okay, see you, Christo. Thanks so much for stopping in. I got phone calls from a lot of people who were very senior in the Mussar community, asking what I was doing and why did I pick that name? And, why wasn't I just sticking with this other organization where I'd been trained? And I felt like there was something I had something different to say, and I didn't want to work under the constraints of other groups, which were doing really good work, but I just kind of wanted to do my own thing. But it wasn't easy to do. And it's, I've been, the website's been up for a long time, and I'm really happy with how things have grown, but it is, sometimes there's pushback in the world. And if you have the vision that like, hey, this is something I think that's, can be a positive, sometimes we need to kind of listen to ourselves. And it wasn't like I was alone. I talked to family and friends, and this is what I was thinking, and this is why I'm thinking of doing it this way. And they're like, yeah, that makes total sense. So it's good to, I think, also to have people that we can go to kind of support us. Or sometimes, there have been other times where I've had ideas and those same people have been like, I don't know about that one, Greg, maybe you should give that a little bit more thought before you move forward. And maybe I moved forward anyway, maybe I didn't, but it's really, I think, important to have those people around. Any other thoughts or comments? Karen?
So sometimes I think it's helpful to reframe the word rationalization with the phrase inner critic. From a literary standpoint, when I'm writing, and this can apply to anything else that I'm doing, the inner critic is what gives me pause. And what I was taught is to find out where that inner critic voice is coming from. Is it from an experience? Is it from a person? And then evaluate the source to know if I need to pause for longer or which way I need to go. So it's maybe somebody would find value in thinking of rationalization sometime as the inner critic. That's helpful for me.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for sharing that. And I think, I think it comes back to, your comment, complements mine very well with where we're looking at, and I'm blanking on the name of the rabbi who wrote about chutzpah, where it's like, well, how do I know whether I'm on the right track or not? Or I'm having this, one is, we explore the inner world, and sometimes we need to look at the outer world, either the impact this could have on other people or bringing in other people for advice. And I think that's really humility, one way to kind of nutshell humility, like what's the impact on me? What's the impact on other people? Where, should I move forward with this? Should I not move forward with that? And asking those kind of questions, I think, is really fundamental to the Mussar practice. Yes, Sarah.
Is it to have the to have courage of your convictions? If you, feel strongly about something, to be able to speak up, like you say, you might have an idea and you might run it by some people and they would say, oh, that sounds good, or maybe you need to think about that. But you still, in the end, if you feel strongly, I think that our intuition is a guide. And I think that often we lose touch with our inner voice and hear too much static from the outside. But yeah, so to have the courage of your convictions.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important element. And ultimately, it's making choices for ourselves, owning our own choices, owning our own decisions, and being, okay with that, and saying, you know what, I'm gonna just This is where I need to have the courage of my own convictions. All right, well, with that, we will have our closing meditation. So everyone, please close your eyes. And once again, take a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. We'll just take a moment of gratitude for those who have shared this journey with us tonight. Maybe have a good week, a good Shabbat. I will see you soon. Thank you all so much. And I just realized I'm going to be on vacation for the next 2 weeks and I haven't told anyone, so I'll send out a reminder, but I'm going to the East Coast to visit my father and some friends. So I will see you back in mid-July. Yeah, so
A great trip.
thanks so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.